Okay, so we're so excited to have Kathy Fettke on the Tech Guys Who Invest today. Kathy, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Kathy, we want to jump right in and ask you a pretty strong question. And I think a lot of people are confused by this concept. And so what I want to ask you is, what is the distinction between being wealthy and being rich?
I've heard many different ways of describing that. I can tell you for us at Real Wealth Network, we describe real wealth as having both the time and the money to live life the way you want to with the people you want to spend the time with. And too many people don't understand that concept and really give 80% of their time away to somebody else to build wealth with,
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. I love that definition because I know personally one of my big whys is freedom. And so I like that that's part of your definition as well. Well, we have a lot of people in our audience they have W-2 jobs, they work day jobs, and they're learning how to invest or they invest on the side. What's the best way for somebody who likes their job to become wealthy?
Well, when you have a job, that allows you to qualify for financing. So it's the way it works is if you have money, you get more money. If you don't have money, it's harder to get. There's still ways. So if you are a W-2 income employee, you have a wonderful opportunity to go to the bank or actually go to a specialist, go to a mortgage broker who can help you find out what your borrowing power is. Because so often people don't even realize that they can borrow money. And if you don't know what to do with money, then that sounds like a terrible idea, right? I mean,
yeah, very much so.
If you're borrowing money, say for a credit card or to go on vacation or buy that new flat screen TV or whatever, that might not be the best use of your borrowing power. But if you were to borrow money to buy an asset that, let's just say, this is the way I describe it in my book, Retire Rich with Rentals. If you were able to buy a golden goose, a goose that lays golden eggs, like you were able to climb that ladder and steal that goose and, take it home and have something that actually lays golden eggs, like pays you because you own that asset. Why would you not want that? Especially if you had to borrow the money to buy that, but you know that this thing is going to be generating money all the time, but that money it generates is more than you borrowed, and you could use that money to pay off that loan. I mean, then it starts to make sense. So the more you educate yourself as a W-2 employee to understand, what can I do with money? Like if I said, I will give you $1 million, all I want is 6%, you could pay me back in 30 years, what would you do with it? And if you don't know, then you just have a lot of education ahead of you, which is great. But you are shaking your head because you do know, like you know exactly what you do. Because if I were charging 6%, but you could go out and make 8% or 10 or 12% or 20, that's a good deal. So yeah, understand your purchasing power, number one, and find out what you would do with it if you could get it.
Absolutely. Because if somebody with a W-2 could win the lottery, and if you don't know what to do with the money, what's going to happen? You'll probably spend it or make a bad investment because people most likely will take advantage of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I live in Malibu now. I have a lot of friends who have made it big in Hollywood at some point in their life, but that doesn't always last forever. And it's heartbreaking and I won't say any names, but when there's big name actors who are really struggling, or the same could be true for athletes. So many athletes who they made millions and then have nothing to show for all their hard work. It really is heartbreaking. That's why I love doing shows like this, to help people see that there's ways to invest that money properly so that you can absolutely have the time and the money you want to live the way you want. And it doesn't have to be red fast cars or mansions or what a lot of the real estate gurus will say is the ultimate goal is to have the hot girl with the hot car with the big house and all that. I mean, not that maybe you want that, but when I say it's really what you want. Like maybe it's you want to be able to fund your children's retirement, or you want to take care of your parents when they age, or you just want to travel the world. I met a guy who just wanted to quit his job and do art. He just wanted to do art. And I said, well, how much is that going to cost you? Like, what's the minimum that you can live on? And he decided it was about $3,000 a month to live good enough to be able to have the abundance of time. And he did. We helped him get into cash flow properties. He was able to create enough passive income through those properties that he could really quit his job and do his art. And that is so much more valuable. Time is limited, money is not. So to be able to have your freedom of time and spend it the way you want to, I mean, it's very, very valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know we both are just shaking our heads like, yes, we totally agree with that. Yeah, I really like that idea of wealth being how you can use your time. And what you just said is one of my favorite things about building wealth is the ability to have freedom through time, because like you said, you just can't get that back.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than being able to spend it any way you want, to feel like, hey, I'm not constrained. I'm not forced to spend this way I don't want to. That's the most precious thing I could think of in this life on this earth. What do you think people often overlook when it comes to building wealth?
The fact that they have a choice, I think, probably is the number one. I mean, it's all about your mindset. And if you grew up thinking that there's only one way to do things, and that's what we're told, basically, to go to school, get good grades. I mean, young people, as you know, you look very young. Young people are under so much pressure to compete. And especially young people today. I have 2 millennial kids. And actually, I guess I've got a Gen Z and a millennial. Very confusing. They're different. They're actually different. They're the same family, but they're different generations and they act different. It's amazing how quickly things change. But
yeah,
my daughter in college says, Mom, all I'm learning in business school is how to be a good employee. She's like, I don't want to be an employee. I want to be a business owner. That's why I'm going to business school. So it's amazing that, we're taught to do good, to get A's, to be a good learner, to be a good follower, to be a good employee, again, to make somebody else the profits, as opposed to there's maybe a couple of classes in our business school that are for entrepreneurs, which is like, how can you be the one creating that service and hiring people and keeping those profits to invest or whatever. So I forget what the question was.
What you are saying right now is just pure gold for our listeners, because you're really just sharing the mindset of a wealthy person, and that's not the same mindset that we normally hear from our peers and from a lot of the middle class. They just don't think the same way. So talking about this abundance mindset and this growth mindset it's great. It's fantastic. I love hearing it.
Thank you. I didn't always have this. Trust me. I was born like a normal person too, but I think entrepreneurs are special. Like, I actually think my brain is wired a little bit differently than some people, but at the same time, I grew up with no education on money, or, I actually had the belief, or I was taught growing up, that I should just work my way into being a really good wife, and that was my generation. Like, that was our goal, is to marry well. And I'm not kidding. That's why my parents sent me to school, was for my MRS.
Wow.
That comes with its own issues that, my generation, and it's different for young people today. But for us, it was like, what kind of job are you going to get as a woman? You've got to marry a man and take good care of him. And so I kind of broke that, thinking, well, no, I want to make my own money. So I was never raised with wealth consciousness at all. But I listened to actually some DVDs that would change the way I think. Somebody gave it to me once. It was called, I think it's just called Prosperity. And it forced me to imagine my life with lots of money. And if you just stop and do that for 5 minutes, even 10 minutes, just stop and imagine you having all the money you need to pay all the things, all the bills, extra left over. What are you going to do with that money? Picture it, meditate on it. You'll be shocked at the kind of interference that can come up when just having that thought. Like, a lot of times people can't even think about it. They can't even imagine what they would do with money. A lot of times it will come up as, that's wrong. That would be greedy. That would be taking from others. or it might be, oh, you know, people are only going to like me because I'm rich. It's amazing what kind of blocks can come up when you start imagining yourself as wealthy. But I did it, and I listened to this CD 30 days straight, having myself imagine me being wealthy. And with each time that something like that would come up, where be like, whoa, if I'm wealthy, I'd probably just lose it. Okay, well, then I would journal on that. Well, what if I didn't, you know? What if I invested it well? Or, you know, oh, well, my friends would only like me because of money. It's like, well, you know, what if my friends also had money? Then they didn't need my money. So you just can work through these lies that we've been taught through the years, or these self-beliefs we've had that absolutely are the reason that there's a block. There's no other reason that anyone, I mean, if you hang out with wealthy people, you'll find out that most people created it through having ideas about it and implementing those ideas and going for it and not having the blocks, or removing the blocks over time.
If you're listening to this, you have to be writing this down. That's all
You've got to try the visualization technique that she just mentioned, and let us know what you think of how it feels.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're right in our wheelhouse right now with this mindset.
I'm so glad.
So with that mindset, for you, it was a DVD that allowed you to spark the idea of visualizing yourself with money. Mm-hmm. That idea that may not work for everybody. What are some other ways that you help people transition out of that conditioned mindset that we have been accustomed to, the way we think about money? How do you help people change their mindset?
Yeah, well, our words are power, right? When we speak what becomes reality, and what we think becomes reality. So we've got to be super careful about what we speak and what we think. So be very careful about how you talk about money and how you talk about people who have money. Because if you complain about paying bills, that's blocking the flow, as opposed to, you know, if I'm going to write a check for the water bill, instead of being like, you know, it's so expensive, that the fact of the matter is it's a miracle that I can turn a little faucet and water comes out of it. I mean, that's really, it's incredible. I think of the billions of people who don't have that. So when you write your water bill, be grateful. Be so grateful that water flows to your home or your office or wherever. Same thing with, you know, your car or your home or whatever. I hear people complain about the taxes in California where I live. They are high, but it's, you know, it's a beautiful, I could go live somewhere else, right?
Yeah,
I live
absolutely.
here because I love it. And like my husband will say, I'm happy to write that check because I love this place. You know, it's not the easiest check in the world to write. California has high taxes, but that's part of the reason why it's beautiful. So, you know, start to listen to the way you speak about it. The first time I realized that I was really, that I had a real poverty mindset is Rich and I had just bought our first house, and we were really strapped. I mean, it was a tough time. And, but you know, we got a big house. We were renting out every room in it. And then a friend of ours, we were just kind of sitting there in our living room, and we look out the window and we see a friend of ours pull up in a truck. A bunch of people come out. There's like, all of a sudden there's ladders and lights. And we realized they came to light up our house for Christmas because they knew we didn't have any money left over after buying the house. So we walk outside and there's all these workers and they're lighting up our house. It's amazing. And then when they're done, they come in, they're like, Merry Christmas. And he's like, where's your Christmas tree? And we're like, oh yeah, we have that in the budget. He's like, I'll be back. He runs down, gets a Christmas tree, drags it into the house. I literally like Santa. And bam, we've got a lit Christmas tree and a lit house. And we're just like, oh, thank you. That's amazing. Thank you. That was an amazing welcome home present. And then as he's leaving, he sees on the floor a fax machine. This is back when that was a thing. There was a fax machine on the floor. It had a little note on it for $50. So I was going to go sell it at a garage sale somewhere. And he's like, whoa, you're getting rid of that fax machine. I need one. And I was like, oh, it's $50. And he just kind of looks at me like, that's all right. And it just leaves. I just look at my husband. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a horrible person. I do not like. Here's someone who's just demonstrated giving and opening the flow and abundance, and I just, cut it off. So that's when I started listening to the TV. I have a problem. I just didn't. I felt so blocked. Like I had to hold on to every penny. And it's the minute that you can realize that money, it flows like a river. And if you block it, it doesn't flow. But if you let it flow, and flow comes through generosity for sure. It opens up that valve. That doesn't mean you should go spending money on things you don't need. It's still important to have a clear set plan for how you spend your money, but make sure that generosity is a part of that.
Yeah, it's so cool to hear you talk about the power of the mind and thinking in this way, and using words and using thoughts, and the way that ties to energy, and that it will come back to you. I remember when I first learned about this, it was through my education on wealth, and trying to teach myself to take on the wealth mindset. And I thought that this sounds ridiculous. Like I have never heard this before. I'm not sure that just thinking something or saying things would work. And then the more and more I learned, and the more wealthy people I was able to talk to about it, the more I realized, wow, there's something in common here. They all think this.
That's exactly when I started the Real Wealth Show. That was exactly it. It's the podcast I still have 15 years later. That was my mission, was to understand the way wealthy people think. And I would interview them one after the other to just understand what goes on in your brain. And you're absolutely right. They are generous. They are not afraid of failure, because money flows. When you really understand that, it's like, oh, that failed, I'll just try this. Whereas like the first time you buy an investment and it doesn't go well, I'm never going to do that again. That's not how it works. If you talk to anyone who's successful, they have failed a million times. They just get back up and do. It's like asking a toddler, oh my gosh, you fell down, forget about it, you'll never walk.
That's a fantastic analogy when you think about it.
Yeah.
If you use walking as an example, you'll fall however many times in your life, but you don't think about, man, I should probably just stop walking.
Right.
So with that's a great segue into the fear of losing money. If you're using other people's money, you're using your own money, there's still that hint of fear that you may lose it. So how do you deal with that? And I suppose it's that abundance mentality, but I'd love to hear your thought process behind that.
We've lost a lot of money. We in 2009, we had a $5 million portfolio, and we were at maybe $250 in the bank by 2009.
Wow.
We got hit really hard. That was a difficult time. But then we came back because we learned so much. So I have that entrepreneurial brain naturally that is willing, is not afraid to take risk, almost to a fault. I'm married to somebody who is more conservative, and over the years we've learned to work together. Oftentimes when you're married, you have an opposite. You're attracted to your opposite. But even if that attracted you in the beginning, it also makes you crazy, and you start to really resent that part of that person because they're so different from you, when in fact it really is, it is your other half. Like when you can really honor this person has a different perspective, and if I can really see what that perspective is, and they can really see mine, we can make this work together. So that's really where things changed for us. Is I was too much of a risk taker, so I would make a lot of money, but I'd lose a lot of money. And if you know entrepreneurs, that's a pattern. It's hard to be the spouse, but the spouse would probably never do anything, take any risk, right? And end up in a 10-hour-a-day. People I know who drive 2 hours to work for 8 hours, come on, they have no life. So,
yeah.
To find that happy medium, what we finally figured out is, okay, let's use each other's strengths. So if I come home with an amazing, brilliant idea, that I don't want to hear all the reasons it's not going to work. That's where his brain naturally goes. I want to hear him say, wow, tell me more. Oh my gosh, interesting. Tell me more. And what else? And how would you see that working? And tell me more, until I've worked my way all the way through it so that I can come to my own conclusion if it was a good or a bad idea. And the same with him. If he's like, okay, once he's taken me all the way down the road, asking a million questions without shutting me down, then I can say, well, tell me, what concerns you might have. What fears do you have? What is maybe I'm not seeing? And then together we look at that. And so that when we take risks, they're calculated risks. And that's it's funny, I hadn't really thought about that until now. Rich wrote a book called Extreme Success, and it's about taking calculated risks. He's a huge risk taker physically, not so much with business. He is more now that we've kind of worked this out. But physically, I mean, he jumps, he was in the X Games, and he jumps off
awesome
5,000 foot wall. I mean, like he skydives and rock climbs and surfs and all this stuff. But he does it in a way where he can do it because he's so confident. Like bungee jumping, he was in the X Games for bungee jumping. Obviously, the first, there's a lot of engineering there. Like, got to make sure that the bounce.
That's pretty important.
That is important.
And the way, all this stuff, and they would really calculate it before jumping. And it's the same with real estate. It's like, really look at all the ways that this is going to, anything that could possibly go wrong. Make sure it's been taken care of and looked at, and then do it. Then take the jump.
That's awesome. I can't wait for Judy to listen to this one. She and I are the same, where, she's very, very, very focused on the detailed analysis and thinking of all the things that could go wrong and making sure that you take care of those. And I'm the big dreamer and the visionary who has all these ideas about why this is so great. So,
yeah. And
cool.
You can really drive each other crazy, and it can lead to divorce if it's not figured out how to really use each other's strengths to move forward or not move forward. That there have been times where Rich would go, I know you think this is such a great idea, but look at the data I have. This was like a property in Vegas I wanted to buy right before the market crashed. And he's like, no, look, these factors are here and they don't fit what you normally say, you're looking for in a deal. It's like, oh, okay. We walked away. Those what we would have bought ended up just completely crashing. It was a horrible investment, and he saved us from it because he was willing to listen to me, and I was willing to listen to him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I totally agree. So it used to frustrate me because I felt like I was getting shut down for my ideas that I'm excited about. But then Judy learned to give me a little time to be excited with my deal. And then once I calmed down, she would talk to me.
Exactly. That's the key.
It was awesome. So yeah, that's really cool when, people who are in a relationship learn how to leverage those strengths, and then you guys can build wealth together.
Yes. As
awesome.
Partners. Mm-hmm.
So, Kathy, what have you learned about yourself as you've gone through this journey of building wealth?
That there's always more to learn. There's always more to learn. And the responsibility for me at this point, I'm invest other people's money now. We have syndications where people invest in our developments. And so I have other people's futures, depending on the success of the deals that we're doing. So it just takes enormous focus, and as it kind of comes back to what I talked about earlier, is being extremely clear about what we're doing, where we're going, what kind of deals we'll say yes to and what we'll say no to, having a very good team of people to make sure that we've looked at the tax implications of it, and what would happen if there was a recession, what would happen if there wasn't a recession. You're kind of looking at all the what ifs, because at this point it's not just my money, it's other people's money.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good stuff.
And speaking of the recession, a lot of people smarter than Adam and I keep saying something's coming. And when 2008 happened, I was a freshman in college, so I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
With that said, you've lived through the recession, and you said it hit you hard, you bounced back. How do you recommend investors prepare for something that could be the same caliber, could be worse? We don't know. How would you recommend people prepare for that?
Well, let me be super clear. Something is coming. It does every 10 years. There's no reason why it won't again. And it really comes down to the fundamentals, that there's really some major issues in this country and in the world that has to do with manipulation of currency and massive debt and entitlements, and the fundamentals aren't there. So we can keep borrowing, but at some point it's sort of like getting another credit card to pay off the old credit card. At some point you get you get busted for that. So how do you prepare? What I'm telling people is exactly the way we prepared last time. When I was when I was interviewing people like Robert Kiyosaki on my show back in 2005, he was explaining that cash flow is the name of the game. So if you really invest for cash flow today and are conservative in that process, so in other words, your loan to value isn't going over 75%. I think now even some of the people I listen to are saying don't go over 65%. Don't count on rents continuing to rise. In fact, add into your pro forma the possibility that they could go down. As far as rental properties. So don't over leverage, invest for cash flow. And if you're buying housing, for sure, only invest where there's job growth and population growth. So we taught this, I should say Robert Kiyosaki taught this to us in 2005 on my show. And I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm selling all of my California property because it did what it's supposed to do. It went up in value, but now it's hit a peak. So now I'm going to sell it, and I'm going to buy where the boom is just starting somewhere else. Because usually it's not a global recession, meaning not everything goes down. Usually some things go down and some go up, and it just depends. If you had shorted the market, like the Big Short, and you would have made a bunch of money in housing by betting against it back then. So there's positive or negative to everything. So if certain markets are totally bubbly, which they are, San Francisco, New York, pretty much, LA, San Francisco, New York, Miami, Seattle, Denver, there's certain areas that are really, the fundamentals aren't there anymore. But they've done, if you own real estate, you made the money, like you made it. So take it, don't waste it. So basically Kiyosaki was saying, sell the California properties and buy in Texas, because back in 2006, their values in Texas hadn't gone up at all. But the job growth and the population growth was expanding exponentially. So you had this chance to sell. I help people sell one property and exchange it tax deferred into 3, 4, 5, even 6 properties, one property into several. And their cash flow would quintuple. Like one lady sold a $400,000 property in Stockton. We got her 4 properties, like 3 properties in Texas. They rented the same. So her cash flow tripled, but the one she sold was old, and then ones she bought were new and right in the path of progress. So during the recession, the house she sold in California, the overpriced Stockton property, she sold for $400,000. It was $75,000 after about 18 months.
Oh gosh.
So the person who bought it was not listening to my show.
Apparently not.
Because the fundamentals weren't there. Why would you buy a $400,000 property that was in a bad part of town, C-class property that rents for $1,200 that needs all kinds of repairs? Doesn't make sense. Whereas you could buy a $140,000 brand new property in the path of progress where the jobs are that rents for the same amount. So the people who did that, they did not even feel a recession. She quit her job. She had her passive income. Those properties have since tripled in value. And people said, values will never go up in Texas. They'll always go up if there's more jobs than there is housing. Because even if you've got nothing but land, you can't build overnight. You just can't. It takes time, and there's utilities that have to be brought in and stuff. They couldn't build enough to keep up, so the value still went up, even in Texas. So it's the same thing. Today, you've got this chance to sell and get into markets that are kind of acting like Texas. And Texas is not like Texas was. It's boomed. It's already done its thing. So the next markets are, the hottest, fastest growing part of the U.S. is between Tampa and Orlando right now.
Yeah. which is where we live. So
Perfect.
Where we're headquartered, baby.
That's it. You're in the heart of it all. That's where it's happening.
yeah, awesome. And it feels like it too. I mean, we feel all kinds of action all around us.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's kind of, and I want to get back to what you were talking about here in a sec, but just a quick note, an observation by me is when you're in the middle of it and it's relatively new to you, you know, it's hard to tell what's going on exactly. You know, is this a bubble that I'm in, or am I feeling the market conditions that I'm feeling? Are they overinflated for where I am? But then when you compare them to one of those bubble markets that you talked about, it's easy to see that those really are.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It is hard to know because Florida, you know, it got hit hard last time. So what's different this time? And really what seems to be different this time is there's more job growth. There's less speculation. It's really people moving there, getting jobs there. It's not just like The Big Short where a stripper bought 5 houses, you know. But it's not that kind of, these are like either retirees or people that are moving there. There's job growth. There's 10,000 people retiring every day, and you know they're going to go to a place that has no state income tax, and it's affordable and sunny. So the dynamics are different this time around. Plus prices it took a while. It took a long time for Florida to rebound. It took so much longer. So it's still so cheap. I mean, there's obviously pockets that are probably peaked, but for the most part, it's still pretty cheap, right? To live there.
It is. Oh,
Very
yeah.
much so.
Yeah, very compared to other places. It really is.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
So you were essentially telling us about the Real Wealth Network when you were explaining what you were helping those people do. That's your business model, right? How did you think of that? It's such an awesome idea. How did you think of that, to do that?
You know, I wish I could say I had it completely planned out, but I had no idea. The way it started was I did exactly what my parents wanted me to do, and I married really well.
Excellent. They were right.
Yes.
It worked out.
It worked out, but I was a stay-at-home mom, and I had, living the dream. We just bought a big house, and he had just written his book, Extreme Success, and he was business coaching, and I was totally living the dream. And then he came home from a doctor appointment, found out that a freckle on his forehead actually was melanoma, and they did more tests, and the doctor said he might only have 6 months to live. And this was 15 years ago, exactly, or even more than 15 years ago. But as much as I couldn't imagine that could be true, that a freckle could kill the guy who, jumps off mountains and stuff. No, I don't believe it. I mean, he literally bungee jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
That's a crazy, and off Half Dome in Yosemite. But
Nice.
I couldn't imagine a freckle, would take him down. But so that's when I just started desperately trying to understand money. It was out of love. I wanted him to just take the time he needed to be with his family and friends and get better. And I was like, I'm going to figure this out. So that's when I started the Real Wealth Show, and I just started interviewing wealthy people, trying to understand the mindset. I wanted to create passive income because I wanted to stay a stay-at-home mom and be able to be at every recital or every dance class or whatever. I wanted to be able to be there. And I learned through those interviews that, owning a business is the key, and that business can be real estate. I mean, real estate, you can make a lot of money in it if you treat it like a business. So it really came down to operating a great business. And then I would have people like Robert Kiyosaki on who would tell me things like, go invest in Texas. So we just followed it. We just did it. And I came on the show and said, well, I went to Texas and I bought 5 properties. It works. I did it, And then my phones blew up, and they're like, we want to do that. Who did you work with? And who's your property manager? And how did you do it? And I use these people, and I did. So anyway, I was like, wait, I'm referring all these people. I should just get my license, and then I could take referral fees. And it just evolved that way, where I would set up teams that we would use for our investing, and then it would be sort of ready to go for other people. And then I would just get a little referral fee. So the people that were, my listeners of the show, and they didn't have to pay anything extra. It's just that who I was referring them to would pay me. So I ended up getting my real estate license, and then because the show took off, and I was in San Francisco, and I got pretty well known because it was a big station. I started to get invited to speak at other people's real estate events, and this was again like 17 years ago. No, maybe 15 years ago, and those were the worst. You guys are too young to know, but it was so gross. I think there's a few people out there, but slick business suits, and here's how you do it, pointing at the camera, I'll make you rich, and run to the back of the room and buy my CDs, and you could be rich too. And then when it was like old dated material that didn't work anymore, and cost 20 grand for a boot camp, that kind of thing, the boot camp model. So my husband Rich was like, people really need to understand the truth. They need to get the real information from real investors and have a network like we've created of people actually doing it, not just selling tapes of things that worked 10, maybe 20 years ago, but not today. So he's like, I'm like, real. Yeah, it should be real. Help people build wealth and like a network. And we're like, oh yeah, Real Wealth Network. That's it. So we just started having meetings, and we said, anyone who comes to speak, you're not allowed to wear a business suit. You're not allowed to sell anything. That's it. All you get to do is share your information. And people were more than willing to do it. So that was just kind of the rule from day one, is we're going to create this educational place and have it be safe. And then I thought, oh, well, there's a way to make money off it too. And like I said, the referral fees for setting it up and making it easy for people. So that's how it still is today. They don't have to pay for our services. We just get the referral broker to broker fee.
Oh, that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki has been a guest on your show, and you have had other awesome guests. Instead of making you pick a favorite, I wanted to ask you, who is somebody you haven't had the chance to interview yet that you would love to have on the Real Wealth Network?
Oh, that's so good. One person I really want to have on is Peter Diamandis of Singularity University. Yeah. Because you're the tech guys. I'm really, I was born and raised in Menlo Park. Steve Jobs went to the same coffee shop I did.
Oh, cool.
I saw our neighborhood just, become the Silicon Valley when I was young. Our houses there were $50,000. That same house is $5 million today, because that was the epicenter of technology. So I love technology. I love being on the cutting edge. And that's kind of what's helped our company too, is Rich is he's really into technology. So he got my radio show on iTunes the first month there was such a thing as a podcast. And overnight I went from having a San Francisco audience to 27 countries where,
oh, wow.
I suddenly had investors from Australia saying, can you help me buy US property? And he took me outside and shot a video. He's like, what do you do? And I said, I help people build wealth through real estate in the best markets. And Goldman Sachs saw that. And I ended up winning an award as one of the top 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs by Goldman Sachs, because he just shot a little video and put it on our website.
Oh, man.
So I love technology. And Singularity University is on the cutting edge of technology and what's coming. And so I'm constantly following Peter Diamandis, and I actually got a press pass to go to the Singularity University next week. So I'll come back with all kinds of information, but I'll tell you what, our world is not going to look the same in 10 years. No. We're going to be, with all the medical technology, people are going to be living longer. They could be living at home longer, because I actually did a show with one of the Singularity people on how that's going to work, but you'll have robot nurses, that can take care of you. So people will just be living at home. It's already happening. All of that. So again, living longer, and then the driverless cars, and pretty soon you'll even be able to, I can't wait for this. You'll be able to fly your own car. So, and it's not that far ahead. It's really not that far off. So imagine what that will do for real estate.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait. And then you start to think about the strategic locations. You could pick real estate, pieces of property based on transportation hubs and things like that. Yeah, it's really, really fun to think about. So speaking of technology, we wouldn't let a good guest go without asking a question about technology. So Kathy, since it sounds like you're a big fan of tech, what is a piece of tech you really love, or something that you just, are so glad to have in your life that's a piece of tech?
It's a great question. I would say, quite honestly, look at this, the ability to have meetings and broadcast them right here. I'm sitting at home, my home office,
Yeah.
and being able to have this conversation that who knows how many people will get to see. So I do love the sharing screen, podcast, Facebook Live, all that. That just makes information so much even more accessible. Yeah, I love that.
Awesome. Great. Well, Kathy, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate your time, and I think you've added tons of value to our listeners today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Kathy. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.